ClearTalk. Hoping that this is debate starting into got this. Hello. Okay, here we go. Sorry. My noise gate is too strong. Yeah, I think the noise gate was way too strong. Maybe I should have just put a suppressor on it. I don't know. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so here right above is the one-time donation. Sorry, I'm trying to get all this first time me streaming there. So one-time donation if you want to join ClearTalk. But we have the debate is getting ready to start. It's supposed to start at 8 o'clock. Well, Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern. So we're gonna get in here and swap over real quick. I am watching it off of C-SPAN. So you can do it that way.
Hey, what do you want to hear from the candidates tonight?
Yeah, I would like to hear our ex-president apologize for January the 6th.
We'll pause that just for a second. So as we get ready, of course we have, we've got Kamala Harris and Donald Trump off. I guess this is starting up.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds, including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special, the most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way
forward. Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face. Historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening.
Okay, I can mute that fine over that. Okay.
This presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing, 2 minutes for loud. There is no audience here tonight in this hall.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Yeah, that was the one thing that they were arguing for. Harris wanted the mic.
Kamala Harris. What's up? Good debate.
See, have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid.
And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year, because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance.
It's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession.
Something that
you just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences. Like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs entry. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation.
Yes, but
they had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out. when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support
He also
America's
allowed
workforce
for a lot
so
of
that we don't
outsourcing,
end up having,
even though
on
he
the
said
short
he
end of the
wasn't going to do
stick,
that.
in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about
had a
this,
net
with
loss of
COVID,
like
is he actually
200,000
thanked
jobs.
President Xi. Point when we COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York
Everything's
State
always higher,
pouring in.
everything's
And
always
just
bigger.
look at what they're
Oh, you're
doing
such
to our
a
country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are
hyperbolic
criminals. And
speaker.
that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They
He's always
have,
gonna pull it
and
back to
she
immigration
has
'cause he knows that that's
destroyed
the only
our
thing
country
Republicans
with
have.
policy that's
He
insane.
wanted
Almost policy
immigration to
that
be
you'd
the main
say,
thing.
Often touted that you were able to kill. Then last month, you said that your administration regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because then the very next day you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia will be born, and we will decide what to do. They're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states.
Problem with Trump.
And through
He
the
thinks he can just say anything
genius
and everybody's
and
going to
heart
believe it.
and strength
Like
of
it's what he
6
says is
Supreme
just
Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions
chiseled
for rape, incest,
in
and
truth.
life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going
Roe v.
to see, look,
Wade
this
had
is an
states'
issue that's
rights.
torn our country apart for
That man had
52
states'
years.
ability
Every
to
legal scholar,
choose
every
just after a
Democrat,
certain
every
point.
Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be
Try
brought
to
back
put
to the
them for
states where the people
extreme
could vote. And that's what
decisions,
happened. Now,
extreme
Ohio,
laws that were
the vote was
previously
somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal,
in
much more liberal than people would have
certain
thought.
states,
But each
we have
individual
now
state
seen
is
come to light.
voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your
Thank you
response
for
to
correcting
President
him.
Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor
She
or
tied him
nurse to
to it.
provide
That's
health care.
actually
In
pretty
one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when
we had in
Congress
Mississippi.
passes a bill to put back in
12-year-old.
place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as
And she
President of the United States, I will
wound up having to carry
proudly
it
sign it
to term
into
and having
law.
the baby.
But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected,
Has no
he
clue who
will
the
sign
father
a
is.
national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in
That is in
particular the
2025.
freedom to make decisions about one's
Whether
own
he
body,
agrees that he
should not be made by the government.
We've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states.
not
And
true.
the states are voting. And it
Now,
may
I
take
do
a little
think
time.
that he-
But for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart. And they've wanted it back in the states. And I
No, it
did
hasn't.
something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it
Well,
came
I
to your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she
yes,
said
she
she'll
would
go
have
back to
to.
Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what? I think probably her
because
boss,
Republican,
if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the
courts
beach.
keep trying to
But
block
look,
it.
her boss went
Over
out
and over and over
said,
again.
we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea.
No, not
and
the
how
main
unfair
Supreme
that would have
Court.
been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people
are
that had to
local
pay
state
off their student
Supreme
loans.
Courts that
They
are,
didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that
preventing
they
it.
talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me. But I really didn't. Look, we don't
Maybe
have to
you and your,
discuss it because
VP should
she'd
talk.
never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't
not
get student
something
loans. They
you
didn't
should
even come
want to
close to
hear.
getting student
Well, I
loans.
haven't talked
They
to him about
taunted
that.
young people and a lot of other people
We
that
should be
had loans.
discussing everything.
They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's
It's
abortion
ridiculous
bans.
that keeps being said.
Couples who pray and
Trump.
dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country?
like
working
90%
people,
or more
working women
of
who are
abortions
working one or two
are,
jobs, who can barely
before
afford
the,
child
20
care as
weeks.
it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw they know that and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you
That's
answer
the
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former
can't
governor
do
of
one
Virginia.
after birth.
The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to
just
Republicans,
went ahead and
Democrats,
said
voters
that,
across the board in this country. Vice President Harris,
up to the
you were
states
tasked
or
by
something,
President
just to
Biden
give
with
an
getting to the
answer.
root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border
gonna hit
security
on
bill,
the
which I
bill.
supported. And
Which he
that bill
blocked.
would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help
because he
those
wanted
folks who are
something to talk
working there
about on
right
the
now
campaign trail.
overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem
Didn't
the
want
flow
them
of
to look like they
fentanyl
got a
coming
win
into
on
the
the
United States.
border.
I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally
Although I didn't
affected
agree with that
by
bill.
the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why?
But what I mean,
Because
I
he'd prefer to
don't mean that
run
I
on a
disagree
problem
with the entire
instead
bill.
of
I just
fixing
disagree with
a
certain
problem.
parts of it.
And understand, this comes at a time where the people. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like
This is
Hannibal
interesting.
Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not
This
hear him
summer was
talk about
probably heat.
is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in
This
a
is
different
silly.
light. So
This is
she
silly.
can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the
maybe that
history
was
of
silly for her
politics.
to say,
That's because
too.
people want
I
to
don't
take
know.
their country back.
sure they leave at
Our
some point. I
country
don't know
is
if they
being
leave early.
lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot
Now
of
he's
towns
gonna
don't want to
dis-
talk. Not
now
going
he's
to be
gonna cite a
Aurora or
bunch of
Springfield.
lies.
A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because people that came
is the
in,
newest
they're
one. This is a
eating the
lie.
cats. They're eating the pets of the people
He's
that
gonna look
live
a fool
there.
here.
And this is what's
He's gonna look-
happening
I hope
in
she's
our
got the
country.
true
And it's a
details. I
shame.
hope she
As
actually has
far
the
as
details.
rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is she's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, will end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people are
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
It's in Canton, Ohio.
You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement
black
of
lady
200 Republicans
was
who have
equated to a
formerly
Haiti-
worked with President Bush,
Haitian.
Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the
those are
inside
not
track
good
on who
endorsements.
the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already,
I wouldn't have
just ask
mentioned
people
those.
who have worked with him. His former chief of staff,
mean, I know
a
she's trying to
four-star
mention
general,
Republicans
has said
that
he has
endorsed her,
contempt
but,
for the
I mean-
Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is
those are
dangerous
my
and
goodness.
unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump. Issues that affect the American people are not being addressed. I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with
Yeah, she does look
Afghanistan
like
and
she
the
has some
Taliban
kind of
and the
a
13 people
platform she's standing on.
They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never
He only
fire
fired
anybody.
people when they
Look
went
at the
against
economy.
him.
Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting
Any of that have
president
to fucking
in
have to do
history
with
by far.
What was being talked about?
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have, so I know you believe that number is much higher.
Much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world. Crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from
Even in
someone who has
major
been
cities.
prosecuted
New York,
for
Chicago, they've all come
national
down.
security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has
Yeah.
been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big
if we're gonna
court appearance is in
deport
November at his
immigrants
own
for
criminal
supposed
sentencing.
crimes,
And let's be clear.
Sounds like he needs to be
Where
deported
each
too.
person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law. Agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But
Okay, she's
frankly,
hitting
the
some-
American people
okay.
are
She's
exhausted
hitting the
with this
little
same old tired playbook.
bullet list
Vice
of
President
her
Harris, thank you.
economic
Excuse
plans.
me. Every one of those cases
claimed she didn't
was
have-
recently from the Supreme Court.
Which was
I'm winning
complete
most of them.
BS.
But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election.
President
They're
Trump-
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand that actually be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department
say
of
that.
Justice against his political
laugh, but he did
enemies.
say that, even if he admitted it
Someone
or
who
not.
has openly expressed disdain for members of now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
Weaponized, please.
We gotta
This is the
continue.
one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy
President
with a fake
Trump,
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get
went
to. Michael.
nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban film.
Actually, I'm
You
glad they
supported
don't.
decriminalizing
Let 'em
border
talk.
crossings. Now have so many of your policy positions changed.
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point
She
that
really
you've
needs
made.
to
But in
clear this
particular,
up.
let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our
fucking say it.
because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not
She
everybody
needs to
got
state that her
handed
values
$400
are
million
that she would
on a
like to
silver
see
platter and then
fracking
file bankruptcy 6 times.
reduced or something.
Is a
Even
value
if that
I
is her
bring to my
values, she
work
would no
to
longer
say
see it.
we are
But
going to work with the private
but
sector
she
and home
understands
builders to increase
that banning
3 million
fracking
homes,
right now
increase
is
by
not
3
going
million
to.
homes by the end of my first term.
hell with
My
that.
work that is related
work
to
to lessen
having
it.
a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that
If
is about
that's
protecting
where her
Social Security and
values are,
Medicare
there's a difference
is
between
based on
values
long-standing work that
and
I have done,
policy.
protecting seniors from scams. My values
And
have
whether you
not
uphold the
changed.
values to policy
And
is
what
another
is
thing.
important
But
is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating
values and
people
policy don't always
down.
equate.
And name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader
Because
who
policy
actually
is
understands The strength
the
is not in
time.
beating people down, it's in lifting people up.
Values is
I
what you
intend to be
aspire for
that
policy
president.
to eventually
President Trump,
become.
your
Well, first of
response?
all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised.
And all his
So we don't have to
bankruptcies.
talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it
And
for
not
12
paying
years.
employees and
Defund the police.
people
She's
that
been
he
against
hired
that forever.
to do
She gave all
his
that stuff
buildings
up
and whatnot.
very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please.
Nobody can
Does
hear
that sound
Michael.
familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this.
Where the hell
She
did
wants
that
to
come from?
confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has
won't.
ever
I'm
done
pretty sure
before.
it won't.
When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it, And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it. These millions of people to come through on the southern border. How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval.
So much
I
proof.
got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was
Yes,
told if
and
I
he
got
got
63,
80
which
million.
was what I got in 2016, you can't
Most
be beaten.
of which was voting against
The election
People should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically.
Vote.
And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the Sark
The judge
Republican
looked at it.
and said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread fraud.
standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a
60
technicality.
cases.
Can you imagine a system where a person in an election, if you look at
because you
the
had
facts,
no
and I'd
evidence.
love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the
doesn't, 'cause
problem
we're
that we
past
have
it.
right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we're trying to do here.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having
Actually,
a
that was
very
a good
difficult
line.
time processing that.
That was a good line.
But we cannot afford to have a president of the United
that
States
was actually a pretty good line.
who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. She can't stand her.
She got those votes too because
but
she was part of the ticket.
He got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas,
Started before
a
October
terrorist
7th.
organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so, absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that.
And stop
Work
this
around
shit.
the clock in that solution. There must be, but the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where
The
we
only
can
threat right
rebuild
now
Gaza,
is
where the
Israel.
Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president,
fucking matter
Russia
now.
would have never,
We're not
ever.
talking about
I
any
know
of that. We're talking
Putin
about
very
right
well.
now.
People, when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. In her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke.
Broke up an
Now they're a
agreement that
rich
they were actually
nation.
abiding
And now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
Right now.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people.
She has.
He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
And she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world,
Because the
going to
Nord Stream
Germany
2
and all over
pipeline
Europe?
benefited
Because
Europe.
they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more
Entirely.
of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center
The
right
XL
here in
pipeline
Philadelphia. Back in a
was
moment.
not that big of a benefit for us, and it went over sacred grounds. Furthermore, it was going to take, I mean, it would
The
have been like
ABC
6
News
years before it
presidential
would have
debate
even
will
been.
continue after this.
It would have been 6 years or so before it would have even been of any use. But even then, what extra amount of oil, which was not that much different from the Keystone pipeline that we currently have, it wasn't going to produce that much more, like maybe 120,000 more gallons or something like that. I can't remember what the number is. But it was only like maybe a 10, 15% increase. And most of that oil, just like now, would be exported. That's what we do. We are in the export business with our oil. Our oil that we drill here, we don't use. We use a very small amount of it. Most of it is actually exported. We bring in oil. It's a world economy of oil that's cycles, because you can make more money off of it exporting it than you can actually using it internally. That's the reason why all the countries export it. It's the way they make money. It sucks, but it's the way they make money. They make the most profit that way. So that's just BS on that. And then on all these other, issues, we know with Israel and everything, he would just give more money. He's completely on board with Netanyahu. So as much as I is not exactly on line with Kamala either, or question what she's really going to do when it comes to Israel. And, well, hopefully it will be settled before then anyways. If it's still something to be settled in January, that's just messed up. But I know for certain they want to talk about our borders being wide ass open, which they're not. He would be wide ass open with Netanyahu, giving them everything in the world that they want and need. He's said as much. So I don't completely agree with that at all. The abortion thing, I do agree. I mean, I do feel that he probably genuinely probably for him to not acknowledge that there is a broad spectrum of the Republican Party that wants a ban, and that there would be a whole lot of pressure on him if he's back in office to put a national ban on it. Now, granted, Trump was kind of a hit and miss before. He could turn around and be like, no, I'm not doing it, period. And that's fine. That would be a good thing. But we know Kamala wouldn't do that, and her administration. So why would a voter take a risk on him maybe not doing it just because he says he wouldn't, even though he is buckled to some pressure before? No, I haven't said anything. No. Oh yeah, I did tell him the other day. Yeah. Cause I thought this. I'm sorry for that. Anyways, so yeah, I lost my train of thought. I apologize for that. So yeah, just to take the risk of him, not doing that, then I mean, and this whole immigration thing.
And their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take 100 to 150, they should be forced to
Ukraine
equalize. With that being
way
said,
too much.
I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well.
Could have
President,
already
okay,
handled
they
it,
respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. Strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we don't even know, is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer
that very
president.
well would have been a possibility.
And that we
don't
understand
never
the
know. We won't
importance
know,
of the
but
greatest
it could have
military
been a
alliance the
possibility.
world has ever known, which is NATO. and what we have
Just
done
like him claiming
to
that it never
preserve
would have happened.
the ability of Zelensky
We
and
don't
the
really know
Ukrainians
either.
to fight for their independence.
Maybe not.
Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in
Or
Kyiv
it could have
with
been the
his
same
eyes on the
situation.
rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour.
That was
I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please,
left that
I'll
out.
give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in
Because
and he
they're
started
kind of
the
a
war.
last-ditch
Because
effort.
everything they said
Nobody
was
wants to
weak
actually
and
use nuclear
stupid.
weapons.
They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later.
Vice
And
President-
that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them
I'm glad she went
to
that way.
Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back
She
to
went
the
through
point
like
of
a whole
how he
shit
has
list of words
consistently
before she
disparaged
said
and
that.
demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her
She's
saying
making
that you
good
began the
points.
negotiations with
thank
the
you.
Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they
It's been stated
blew
it
it.
was like
The agreement said you have to do this,
billion,
this, and they
equipment's
didn't
always
do
left
it.
behind.
They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move
and
on.
these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care.
Then why fucking talk about it
You
so
make
much?
a big
You've
deal out of
said it in
something.
almost
I couldn't
every
care
rally
less.
since that come
Whatever
up.
she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So I'm
I don't
asking,
know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Such a dumb
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that. want better than this.
You could bring it to more
Want
recent
someone who
stuff.
understands as I do. I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless
all the
of people's
Republicans are worried
color
about
or the
DEI
language their grandmother
and critical
speaks,
race
we
theory
all
and all this
have
other
the
BS
same
that's-
dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your third time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled
Okay,
guilty.
that just means he's racist too.
And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying
make
our
the rich
economy.
richer,
They
that's for
have
sure.
no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up. Lindsay?
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard
absolutely
work.
great
I have
plan
a
if it can
plan,
be implemented.
$6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I
great
have
plan.
a plan that is
can be
about
implemented.
allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that
Yeah,
is
we haven't had
constantly
that.
about belittling
'Cause they
and
don't really do
name
that in the
calling.
economy section.
Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's turn
Trump,
back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump,
Let's turn to policy, please.
To defund the police. She has a plan
doesn't.
to confiscate everybody's gun.
President
She
Trump, we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania
No,
or
she
anywhere
doesn't.
else.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's what her
President.
plan is
That's
until
all.
just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
you have
respond
another
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump-
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
going
need
to
to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time to
Harris.
what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things,
Just
we're going to
gave
do it, and we're going to
millions
replace
upon
it. But
millions of people
remember
on
this,
insurance that
I inherited
previously didn't.
Obamacare
Okay.
because Democrats
could
wouldn't
be better.
change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's to come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
90 minutes.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive.
He doesn't have
and there
policies.
are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, let's just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of
people. You made a mistake.
Create something better.
Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather of what that means in terms of little of America
People
care
dying.
deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years,
And what the
we have
future
invested $1
holds for
trillion
these issues.
in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased
Immigration.
domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know
did.
that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing
They
in
outsourced.
American-made products, American automobiles.
keep 'em
It
from doing it.
includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell
It
you, they
did
lost
too.
10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South
already have.
Carolina or any other place. What
already
they've
have
done to business and manufacturing in
being
this
made in
country
Mexico.
is
We've been having cars
horrible.
being made in
We
Mexico.
have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5
gotten
million?
millions upon millions
This is a
of
crooked
dollars from Saudi
administration,
Arabia.
and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic
for
night,
tat
this
on
ABC
that.
News presidential
And
debate
it's all wrong,
from
don't
Philadelphia.
get me
Back in a moment.
Although Biden doesn't show that he's gotten anything like that.
The ABC News
Maybe his son
presidential
did.
debate will continue after
That's
this.
not his son. And his son's not in the administration, where his son-in-law got millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia as well, and he was in the administration. I mean, it's all stupid. Overall, I feel like for his own people, they probably think he's being strong and doing what he's supposed to do. For the people who probably count the most for this, or might get the most out of this, for starters, I don't think they're worried about Trump. I think they were worried about how Kamala would look up against Trump. And quite frankly, I think that's what everybody really was interested in, how well she could hold herself up against Trump. Because Trump has been known to be, just badass debater that could just eat people alive on the debate stage. And I have not seen that. He has not been that snappy. He has not said anything that really was not much, not something that could be really taken as some big sound bite and ran with. Not maybe once or twice he may have had a little small thing that could be interestingly funny, but other than that, it wasn't anything that was like snap, he got her on that. Not like he's done in the past. Which shows that he has clearly lost a step or so in that. I would actually say that she's had more of a got you snap kind of moments than he has. And she's held her ground. She's come back on him when she needed to. She's brought up the things that she needed to. She's spoken pretty well. Hasn't really had any kind of flubs. So all in all, ultimately, I think that makes her the winner. I think she's going to come out on top. Now, whether or not it's really make it a big deal for polling and all that kind of stuff that people worry about, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it'll really make that big a difference. But I've said this before. Anybody that is on the fence about making a decision right now, it's not a decision that's between Trump and Kamala, third party or something. Those who are going to vote for Trump have already decided to vote for Trump. And if they have not voted for Trump, there's a very, very slim chance that they are going to suddenly go, you know what? What the hell? Let me vote for Trump. It just, everybody knows Trump. This is silly to think that there's any kind of significant amount of people out there that's actually weighing on whether or not they're going to vote for Trump or not. I just don't see that. Knowing or understanding just the common sense of anybody who is actually debating on whether or not who to vote for, I just don't see the debate being between Trump and Kamala. I see it's more of a, is Kamala good enough for me to even worry about getting out and voting? And if it is between Kamala and Trump, is Trump bad enough for me to worry about and coming out and voting? Just like in 2020, when, like she said, 81,000 people came out to fire him. 81 million, sorry. So that is where it lies. And I'm not sure how. I think she did good enough to, to probably make some people like, okay, maybe she can hold it. Maybe she's good enough, because she needed to look presidential. She needed to look like she could actually handle herself.
For closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline.
This is his
We're
closing
being
statement
laughed
to
at all
concentrate
over the world.
solely
All
on
over the
her?
world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
So he gives a closing statement where he's just babbling on about stuff that isn't even true and solely based on her, and not talk about anything he actually could commit to or talk to. And it's just fucking stupid. She had a better closing statement. Quite frankly, I think she had a better debate. In my opinion, she definitely won the debate. Now, how much that will translate to potential voters, which is the key thing, right? How much that would translate to key voters, I mean, sorry, I'm trying to exit out. Is the big thing. How much will that actually translate? How many people out there undecided, because that's what what's really the focus here now is who's undecided. And like I said before, the issue is going to be between people deciding whether or not Kamala, she just had to come out and be solid. If she come out, and in any way, looked like she couldn't handle herself, like she couldn't answer questions properly, or looked like she was fumbling with her thoughts, or blah, 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 then it would have been tragic. But she come out, she got her points across, clarified some stuff, but I mean, it is what it is. I think she did enough just to be able to to get some more, people, to those that are questioned, because that's what the idea is, that some people are more or less, I feel like, probably in their minds thinking, okay, is she worth, yeah, there's just a bunch of momentum around her, energy and everything. All these people saying these things, and I've heard these sound bites on whatever social media and whatnot, whatever. But I also have seen these other people bring up this stuff that's a little concerning. Republicans are throwing out blah 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 blah. Let's see what she has to say. If they're tuning in, and I think she did enough clarification and explaining herself to have probably a good many of those actually, make some sort of decision. I feel like, because I really think she just had to look solid. She had to look presidential. She had to look like she was ready to be president. I think that's that a lot of people are at this. There was those that were undecided. I feel like those are at this point where they're like, yeah, but is she really ready? Can she handle herself up against somebody like Trump? Even because more than likely they probably don't like Trump. I think most people who are undecided at this point more or less don't like him, or either they would, they wouldn't be undecided. So they're like, if she can handle herself against him, who is known to be, just this erratic, um, you know, just dominating on a debate stage, which I even question whether he really ever has been that I mean, he's had his moments, but like, I feel like he's just had a bunch of really good moments on the debate stage, like some of the most recently familiar moments, back in 2016 and whatnot, where, because really his debate against Biden in 2020 it wasn't anything like crazy. He didn't really have any major, that I remember, any major like moments there that were that big. I mean, 2016 is where most people reflect on, his debates against Hillary and stuff like that. So, and he had a whole bunch of good ones then. When there wasn't much that he couldn't be good on because Hillary is horrible. But I mean, uh, I've questioned ever since then how good he really is on the debate, especially the more he gets stuck in his rhetoric that he just vomits constantly, and doesn't care whether or not it's true or not, or whatever the case. um all she had to look was sane. She had to look like she could handle herself. She stuck to being more positive, especially in her closing statement. She was more on the positive side about what she could do to improve things, not go back. We're not going to go back. We're going to improve. We're going to do this and that. We're about the American people, focusing on the American people, where he only just focused on her and all this bunch of BS that was just lies. I mean, and that's how he closed out. Not talking about anything that he was going to do for the American people and why you should vote for him or anything like that. Um, uh, her polls were doing really good. We know that. They kind of flattened out the past week. I think people were kind of in this limbo of, okay, wait. Let's see how she's going to do at the debate. Like, uh, and now I would guess after tonight that I think there's a chance that you'll see a couple of points, maybe a 1 or 2 points more a bump up. Now we had the New York Times or whatever poll come out this past week where she was one below Trump. He was at like 48. She was at 47. Um, I don't know how much. Yeah, it's an A+ poll, but still, polling right now, I just feel like is not being very reflective, especially when we know how much voter registration has boomed over the past weeks. And I'm pretty sure none of that's being calculated in, um, and other things like polling for me right now. I think is skewed at the moment. I think it's not reflective of reality. Um, I would actually think that where polls were saying about 2 points over, is probably where she actually sits, around the 50 mark. He's probably at 47, 48. He's not going any higher. She's probably more around 50. After this debate, I looked at her to get maybe another one, maybe another 2 point bumps, perhaps, over the next week or two. So I look for her to go up to about 51, 52. If I was to be in like a realistic poll, that's what I say. That more or less she's at 50, he's probably at 47, 48. And in the next week or so, she's going to go up to about 51, maybe 52. And he's going to stick at his 47, 48 because he's not going anywhere else. He's not going up. Who's going to vote for him is already going to vote for him. She actually is the one that is winner break, not him. If she loses, it's going to be because she lost it, not because he just won it. All right. Because the voters are in, it's going to be in those who are not decided, those who decide to not even go vote. That's where it's going to be. And the majority of those, if they went and voted, the highest potential for their vote is going to be with Harris. So most people feel like that have undecided, like I said, are going to be either deciding to vote for Harris, vote for a third party, which at this point really isn't even significant at this point. But you could vote it out of your moral conscience or whatever, or just for spite or whatever the case, that's fine. Or you're not going to vote at all. So that's the thing. And we know, 2020 was one of the highest ever. I think it was the highest ever turnout, whatever, for an election. And it was at like 63% or something like that. 65%, somewhere in there. Like the highest ever of registered voters. That's it. So you still have a huge amount of voters that still don't even, that just don't vote. But then we've had this influx of people who have registered to vote here. So there's potential for, there's potential for this to be a blowout. And if it is a blowout, it's going to be on Kamala's side, not on Trump's. If Trump wins, he's going to barely win. It'll be because people decided, unfortunately, not to come out and vote. Voting, turnout will be lower than expected, and then he winds up winning. Because Republicans are the most devoted voters. Doesn't make them more patriotic, really. But they're just hell-bent on making sure that Republicans get in office. And, whatever. Or the Democratic coalition is pretty much made up of more of your left-leaning independent and Democrats. It's a lot larger. It's just getting those people to come out and vote. That's always the problem with the Democrats. It's getting people to actually come out and vote. Because they get in this, whether it's a potential area that, they feel like it's just no way it's not going to go to the Republicans, so they don't vote, or whatever the case. Or they are unexcited about the, elector, the president to elect or whatever. But with the excitement that is around Kamala right now, and if this we were still talking about Biden, that would be the problem. But the excitement that we have around Kamala right now is a whole different story. So, anyways, that was the debate. We've been going now for 2 hours. I hope the stream went well. I hope you enjoyed it if you watched. And, yeah, I look to maybe do this again in the future. But again, if you want to help me out at all, if you like what we're doing here, please consider subscribing, like, share, all that good stuff. Check out my other channels over here if you would like. My drum channel, my gaming channel. Of course, this channel. Discord, you can check that out there if you want to get in. I have, like, in the Discord, I have separated out all the different channels and, like, stuff within those channels, you can discuss and talk about or whatever, give suggestions and everything like that. So you can go there for all the channels and you can, get into conversation, talk with me or whatever on any of those. One-time donation or something, you can go there. Or if you'd like to join and become a part of the JMD Nation, you can go to Patreon. So thank you very much for joining me. Yeah, let me know what you think. Till next time, peace. Been ClearTalk.